So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me again. We're going to start the Gemara today on, for you, really the very, very top of 53a, Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, very easy to find. In fact, the first word is Isha Hoisa Bereris, so no problems in locating the place. In fact, the beginning is just the last few words of the previous page, but there's no point in taking you there because that's just a headline. We were dealing originally with the Simchas Beis HaShoeva ceremony in the Beis HaMikdash, with this very, very happy event every day of Sukkot, and the spectacle that it was. Music and flames and juggling and singing and everything wonderful one could imagine at the time of the Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara went on, if you remember, to talk about the Yetzer Hara. We spent several weeks looking at Psukim in Novi and also in the Talmudic statements about the Yetzer Hara, what sort of adversary it is and how we have to be so careful, particularly at the time of Simcha, that the Yetzer Hara doesn't take us over and we perhaps treat what should be a religious festival with too much levity. And that's why they made these special balconies for women at the time of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva to separate the men and the women during these happy occasions. I'm just going to mute everyone. I've been instructed by my wife to mute everyone except myself. Okay. All right. At the same time, the psukim we dealt with were very messianic, and we looked into psukim on Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. En passant, the Gemara analyzed those psukim in quite a lot of detail. Ultimately, it came back again to the Simchas Beis HaShoeva in the Beis HaMikdash, having gone through a very, very large detour, and took us back to the story as the Mishnah described it. One of the comments in the Mishnah originally was that the illumination in the Simchas Beis HaShoeva in the Chotzer in the Chotzer Noshim were these very large lampposts, almost you might say, on which oil tubs were placed, and these Pirchei Kahuna used to run up and down ladders, filling the oil containers at the top. These were posts almost 50 amas high, according to the Gemara. That's a very high, 75 feet, if you took the modern idiom. They would cast a huge amount of illumination all through the streets of Yerushalayim. And this would illuminate not just the courtyard, but the whole city of Yerushalayim. It could be seen from far as a very bright spectacle. And that's where we start today's Gemara. The Gemara says at the bottom of the page before, which is a Nun Beis Amud Beis, an extract from Mishnah. This is not on the top sheet. It's the last few words of the previous sheet. V'lo hayachotza b'Yerushalayim she'eina me'ira me'or Beis HaShoeva. Such was the brightness of the lights of these very, very tall lanterns in the Chotzer during the time of celebration. There was no courtyard in Jerusalem, in the town of Jerusalem, that was not illuminated. You could write an essay, in one of the in Rehavia, based on the light that was pouring through from the Chotzer in the Beis HaMikdash. These huge oil-lit illuminators. And the Gemara now says Tana, and this is where we move on to the next sheet. Isha. In fact, says the Gemara, so bright was it that Isha hoisa bereres chitin la'ar shel Beis HaShoeva. Women used to do all the fine work they needed to do that normally required bright daylight. Simply in the light of the illuminations of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. In the middle of the night, these lights were so bright. So the Gemara chooses to use an example of bereres chitin. The women used to look through their flour and perhaps pull out lumps and possibly other contaminants from the wheat before it was fully ground and before it was used to make cake or bread. And it's something that would normally require bright illumination, and you do it at daylight, you do it at midday so that you could really see what you were doing. However, this light was so bright that they were able to do that sort of precise work even in the light of the oil lights from Yerushalayim, even though they would have been hundreds of meters away from Yerushalayim. Remember again that these posts were up to 50 amas high, 75 feet high, so they would have really poured their light over Yerushalayim, the lower city below. And it wasn't as large as it is today, obviously. So we're talking about the perimeter of the residential Yerushalayim around the Beis Hamikdash. It's interesting, Tosfos over here asks a sort of halachic question based upon this story. And he says it's impossible to say, really, that women actually did this, that they would try and comb through the flour or some other analysis that required very, very close eye contact, and something that normally requires a lot of light, that they would do so to the light of the oil burning in the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because there is a halacha called me'ilah. You're not allowed to be mo'el mehekdesh. Me'ilah really translates as sacrilege. It's making use of sacred property in the Beis Hamikdash for your own secular and mundane purposes. So if I take something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash and I use it for my own purposes, it's dedicated to the Gabbai of the Beis Hamikdash, but I pilfer it, or even in the Beis Hamikdash, decide to use it for my own purposes. I use a shovel that's supposed to be using to shovel the holy coals, and I decide to do so in order to pull up some earth somewhere, and in order to take out some mushrooms or whatever it is, then I'm chayiv on me'ilah, and there's a penalty for that, and it's osa. So how can you make use of the light, even the illumination that comes from the burning of oil, which is sacred oil, used in a ceremony in the Beis Hamikdash? Might think it's a bit far-fetched, but Tosfos brings up this question. And he answers first by saying, well, maybe that would not really be me'ilah, because we also have a rule that sights and smells don't constitute me'ilah. In other words, if I smell something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, I don't actually eat it. I don't actually eat something which is sacred and shouldn't be eaten by me, but I just smell it, then I'm not chayiv me'ilah. No one says, hey, you've now had benefit of something which is sacred, go and pay up. We don't say that, because smell is something that does not constitute me'ilah. It's not considered to be a tangible benefit I'm having. Similarly, sight. Supposing I go into the Beis Hamikdash and I see the grandiose architecture inside. I see the heichal, I see the beautiful doors, I see the gold leaf around the walls, etc. I say, it's amazing. Like people, lahavdil, elef havdolis might go to the Vatican and look up at the ceilings there and say, wow, what artwork. So I go into the Beis Hamikdash and I'm thrilled by the sight of the beauty of Herod's temple. Have I been have I transgressed on me'ilah? I've just had a benefit. I've had a mundane pleasure from something that's holy. It would be very difficult actually to survive in that sort of atmosphere. We'd have to go into the Beis Hamikdash with dark sunglasses in order to make sure you didn't enjoy the sight. So here again, the sight of something sacred is not considered to be misusing it for mundane purposes. If it were, we'd all be in real trouble. Similarly, says Tosfos, the illumination that comes from the burning of oil in the Beis Hamikdash and using that for me to do my homework, outside the Beis Hamikdash, that also would not be considered me'ilah. And therefore, a woman, maybe she would be allowed to do her housework, so to speak, in the light of the burning oil from the Beis Hamikdash. That would not be considered sacrilege in any way. Nevertheless, Tosfos says it's still a bit difficult to understand, even if it were permitted, why it should be something that we should take for granted could be done. There are certain things that are permitted, but it's still not done. It's pasnished, really. This is holy light, so to speak, coming through, and you're using it because you want to make use of illumination to write your essay for tomorrow's homework. Is that really nice? So So Tosa says that when the Gemara, Brisa here says that a woman used to be a Bereris Chitin, he comes to the conclusion it did not happen, or rather it was not supposed to happen. And all that Brisa means over here is that there was sufficient light for a woman to have undertaken this activity, this close activity, and she would have been able to do it successfully. But rather, she wouldn't have done it because she would have been aware that she was in some way misusing the property of the Beis HaMikdash. It's very interesting because you see how far this idea of sacrilege goes, that, Tosfos is saying even making use of light, which is sacred light, might already be in some way a derivative of the law of sacrilege. And we have something quite similar on Hanukkah. Remember, you're not supposed to also Hanukkah. You're not supposed to make use of the candles of Hanukkah to do your work, which is one of the reasons we have a shamash. The shamash is there so that we can say that we're making use of the shamash, which is not one of the numbered candles after all, and that gives us the license to be able to do things while the lights are burning. I mean, we also have our own electric lights, but even if we didn't have electric lights, the shamash would act as this sort of decoy. On that we can have benefit, but we shouldn't be having benefits from the lights or the candles. It's a similar concept here on a much larger level. We have the Beis HaMikdash with these huge illuminations. And we have the oil that has been purchased from the funds of the Beis HaMikdash, which by definition means that the oil used for the illumination carries kedusha of some sort. It's not kedusha like a korban, but it has a light kedusha attached to it. Someone has dedicated this for temple use. And here you are writing your essay somewhere in Rehavia based on that light. It's really not something we're recommended to do. So that's Tosfos in understanding this lovely story about the extent of the illumination. Now the Gemara goes on to pick up another statement which we said in the Mishnah so many months ago, which we're finally coming back to again. Here we are, the celebrations of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, and the Mishnah said that the people in the courtyard sang and they danced and they clapped and they said Tehillim, and they said Shiros v'Tishbachos, Chasidim v'Anshei Ma'aseh. The Mishnah said Chasidim, not meaning what we call Hasidim today, but pious individuals, v'Anshei Ma'aseh, and people of note, if you like, people who are considered of high status, Hoyu Meraktin bifneihem. That's what the Mishnah said. It's not in your quote of the Gemara. I'm just quoting a few words extra. The Gemara over here only says Chasidim Anshei Ma'aseh, but I'm just taking the quote a bit further. They used to dance v'omrim lifneihem, and they said, or they proclaimed, divrei shiros v'tishbachos, songs and praises, rather like Hallel. They would sing songs to the praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But now the Gemara actually wants to know, or it's going to bring a brisa to inform us what sort of things they were singing. And it wasn't, Avram Fried. It was some specific examples over here. Tana Rabbanon, Yesh Mehen Omrim. Interesting. The brisa is going to give two types of prayer that might have been suited to two types of individual who would pray this way or sing these songs in the Beis HaMikdash at the time of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, and they come from different places, these people. Yesh Mehem Omrim, there would be groups of people who would proclaim the following in their song. Ashrei Yalduseinu Shelo Bisha Aziknu Seinu. Something you don't even expect to see, what the Brisa is going to quote here as potential texts of songs. Comes from nowhere. It's not what you might expect. So what does this mean? Ashrei Yaldu Seinu, Shelo Bisha Eziknu Seinu. The Gemara goes on to say, Elu HaChasidim v'Anshei Ma'aseh. The people who made this statement, Ashrei Yaldu Seinu, Shelo Bisha Eziknu Seinu, here we're talking about the Hasidim amongst the audience in the Chotzer, and the Anshei Ma'aseh, people who are really known for their deeds, their fine deeds. So what is Ashrei Yalduseinu Shlo Bisha Ziknosenu? Fortunate were we in our youth. In our youth, Yalduseinu doesn't mean while we were children, but it means in our youth. Shelo Bisha Eziknosenu, in that our youth has not put to shame our old age. What does that mean? Our youth has not put to shame our old age. So Rashi explains what this means. Is that we're talking now about people who are in their old age. They've reached an age of old age. This is the minyan from Beit Knesset Hanasi, and they're out there in the chotzer of the Beis Hamikdash, and they proclaim, "We know that we led innocent and fine youths, and even though we're now old and we're very pious today, we are not embarrassed by our actions as young people." Most people are embarrassed. You know, when they were young, they didn't take halacha too seriously, the Yetzer Hara was stronger, and you do things in the flash of youth that you wouldn't do later on. So most people, when they get old, they remember their youth and they're embarrassed. I mean, now they've already mended their ways and they're mature and they do all the right things, but thinking back, they're embarrassed by their youth. The sorts of things they used to get up to when they were in university or whatever it was. So the people who are Hasidim and Anshe Maisa have no need for embarrassment. They actually say, honestly, Ashrei Yalda saying, how fortunate were we that when in our youth, Lo Bisha Ziknosenu, it hasn't put our old age to shame. When we look back to our youth, we don't say, oh dear, the sorts of things we did when we were young. So that's one group of people who are proud of their youth. Now the next lot, the Yesh Mehen Omrim, but the other group of people, probably the majority, they would proclaim, Ashrei Ziknosenu Shekipra Es Yalduseinu. Fortunate we are that in our old age, we have been able to atone for the sins of our youth. These are the people who didn't have such a sinless youth. However, as they've got older, they've realized the error of their ways, they've done tshuva, and they've done kapara, and they say, fortunate are we that we are now in a position that we've atoned for the wrongdoings of our youth. And what sort of people are these? Eidu Baalei Tshuva. These are the Baalei Tshuva. Baal Tshuva has regret for the way he spent his past and wishes to go forward and do atonement for it. So you have the Hasidim, the Anshe Maisa, who have no embarrassment about their youth. And then you have the Baalei Tshuva, who are embarrassed, but are thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu that at least now they've been able to put their youth behind them, and they've been able to be a mechaper, to atone for the sins of their youth. And Elu ve'elu omrim, both groups say, both those who are the Hasidim and those who are the Baalei Tshuva, who have had opposite experiences in their youth, both of these say together, Ashrei Misha lo chata, fortunate is a person who hasn't sinned. Umisha chata, but one who has sinned, Yashuv Yimcholo. He may do tshuva and his sins will be atoned for. So whether you had a mischievous youth or a straight youth in any way, there's always a way back. That's what they would say. Anyway, that's the Brisa statement. It's quite interesting because you'd have expected the script of the songs that they sang to be completely different. There wouldn't be sentimentalizing about their past or indeed concerning themselves with their past. They're in the Beis Hamikdash and they're singing for the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Who thinks about these things? What did I do when I was a child? You know, I did the right things when I was a child. What goes through the head of these people that they pick up this as their lyrics? This is the lyrics of what they were singing, says the Brisa. I don't understand myself. This is what the Brisa brings as examples of what they sang. To me, it seems that the script here is out of place for the event, which is the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. And I haven't seen an explanation that really ties the Simchas Beis HaShoeva into the logic behind this particular script. Okay, the Gemara goes on now. Tanya was taught in a Brisa. Amru alav al Hillel Hazaken. The following was said about Hillel, the great Tana, the man of enormous patience, the one who is seen opposite Shammai being a short-tempered individual, very severe and very harsh, according to the normal line of we understand from the Gemara and from stories in the Gemara, and Hillel being the soft, patient individual, very long to anger, and very accepting of mankind with all his flaws. So they said about Hillel, this great honor, this great modest person, when he was celebrating at the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, which he was there, he would have been there during his time, during the second Beis HaMikdash. He would have been in the great courtyard there, and he would be celebrating with the rest of them. And when he was there, what did he say? What did he proclaim? What was actually going on inside his mind? He said the following: the Amar Cain, he said this. It's a strikingly odd statement. Everything we see over here is strikingly odd. Im ani kan, hakol kan, vim eini kan, mi kan. You recognized Hillel there. He says, Im ein ani li mini, vim ani lo, min ani lo ani. Very similar sort of statements, pithy statements. So he made this statement, which is totally at odds with his character. He made this statement: Im ani kan, if I am here in the celebration of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, then hakol kan, everybody is here. Ve'im eini kan, if I were not here in the Beis HaMikdash celebrating with you, mi kan, who would be here? So it sounds like a statement of utmost arrogance. It seems that Hillel is saying, I'm here, so it's as if everyone's here, the party can start. There's no party without me. If I weren't here, there would be no party at all. Even if other people were here, it would just not be a party. That's a simple explanation. But nobody can possibly impute this to Hillel. Hillel, in every other statement he makes throughout Shas, is shown as being a soft-mannered, Onav, Mikol Odom, almost like Moshe Rabbeinu. No one can upset him. The most ignorant bores can have a conversation with him, and he treats them with respect and softly. And over here, he's making a statement. It's that I'm king of the castle. And in fact, there's no castle here if I'm not here. If I'm here, everything's here. And if I'm not here, there's nothing going on. What does he mean over here? So obviously, all the commentators labor hard to try and work out what Hillel is saying. And all I can do is get glimpses from the commentaries. And all the commentaries are at odds with each other. They all try to look at it from a different perspective. Who is the Ani? Maybe he's not talking about himself. Others want to say maybe Ani is referring to Hashem, or Nochi Hashem. What does he really mean? So let's take two explanations over here. One is Rashi and one is Tosfos. And they're struggling. There's no way to explain this statement without struggling. And so if you come up with an explanation which is much clearer, please let me know. What does Rashi say? Im ani kan hakol kan. He's speaking in the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's not saying Im ani kan, if I am here, who? Hillel, because that's a statement of arrogance, and we cannot accept this as Hillel. So now these are words. It's as if Hillel is speaking as a Navi, speaking for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, Im ani kan, Hashem says, if I am here, what does that mean? All the time that I am here, it's because this Beis HaMikdash is meaningful to me. As long as I am a presence in this Beis HaMikdash, and I allow this Beis HaMikdash to continue, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Im ani kan, hakol kan, then everything is working very well. Hakol kan, all the Klal Yisrael can come here, everyone can pray, and everything is fine. But if ein ani kan, if the Jewish people sin to the extent that I determine they're not worthy of the Beis HaMikdash anymore, im ein ani kan, so I remove myself from this place, mi kan, what is left? Even if the building's left standing, It's no more than a magnificent piece of architecture, but it carries no sanctity and no spirituality at all. That's Rashi. And it's clever. And what he's done, as he's placed this statement not as a personal statement by Hillel, but as a statement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in a sense, it's a warning. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says it's all very well nice for you to have a good time and to celebrate now. Remember, you're only here because of my forbearance. As long as I understand the Jewish people are worthy of this building, or celebrations will continue. However, don't take it for granted. Im techta'u, says Rashi, if you will sin to a point that I abandon this Beis Hamikdash, mikan, what's all this for? No one will be here. I won't be here, and the building will be meaningless. That's the way Rashi understands it. It's very beautiful. But the only thing is you've distorted an ani. Ani is not me, Hillel, personally. Ani is me speaking on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it loses out. Tosfos doesn't like that. Tosfos says ani surely is referring to Hillel. And so Tosfos, it's not referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying if HaKadosh Baruch Hu can. So what is Rashi doing, giving us this explanation? So he gives an alternative explanation. And he says, Im ani kan, what does ani mean? Ani means the people. Ani, Hillel, is a representative of the whole Jewish people here. So it is Hillel and the Jewish people. Im ani kan hakol kan. But if the Jewish people are not here, then what's it all about? And over here, Tosfos says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we can't understand this very well, wants to accept the praise of the Jewish people. He wants to have a people. What the word want means, I can't explain to you. But somehow he has a rotzon that the Jewish people should be makir tov to him, recognize God as being the God of mankind, and not turn their back. So in Anikan, as long as the Jewish people celebrate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then Hakol Khan, everything is well. But im ani lo kan, im ani kan, if that means the Jewish people aren't here. The Jewish people don't come to the Beis Hamikdash because they're not interested in it at all. They're interested in high tech or something else. Then mikan, what is this all about? HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs, so to speak, it's like having a king that needs his subjects. If a king has subjects, if the subjects are around, then he's the king. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to have subjects, but if the subjects all desert, they go over the borders to the country next door, he's got no subjects, then the king isn't a king. Mikan, even HaKadosh Baruch Hu is no more the God of his people because the people have abandoned him. Okay, so that's a different perspective. It's the perspective of the Jewish people saying Manikan, and not HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying Manikan. I can tell you there are countless other explanations given to explain this statement because it's so problematic that nobody can let it go by without having a go. There are those who are giving a psychological explanation, which you might say is of general interest rather than to do with the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Im ani kan, what is ani? Ani is my essence. If I invest all my resources in doing what I need to do, even if it isn't just in Torah mitzvahs, anything I need to do as a project. Yes, im ani kan, if I invest all my personal efforts into something, then hakol kan, then everything will work out. Im ani kan, but if I just passively go into a project without any enthusiasm, without launching myself wholeheartedly into it, im ani kan, and that was my mind really isn't in it. I'm doing things out of rote. Mikan, now what's it all about? And that this applies to anything we do, not just worshipping HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but even, planning our careers or our next holiday. If we don't plan our next holiday with full intent, and we're just not going to enjoy it. And if we don't do so, it's just a non-event. So in a sense, it's talking about the extent to which you can personally invest in any project. The ani is like some sort of a key Greek word. I mean, it's me, it's the it or whatever. I've forgotten what you call them in psychology or in Greek philosophy. It refers to the essence of the person. If a person doesn't invest his essence, then it's all worth nothing. If he invests his essence, then it's worth something. Something will come out of it. So that's another way of looking at this statement. Anyway, that's Hillel from this particular statement. We're going to go on with Hillel. We find a lot of statements that Hillel makes are actually need to be analyzed in greater detail, including those we'll come to from Pirkei Avot in a moment. We can pick up a Mishnah from Pirkei Avot, which is very famous, but which is not as easy as it actually sees at first value. And now we're talking about Hillel and the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. The Gemara brings another statement of Hillel's. Hu hoya omer kain. He used to say this. What did Hillel also used to say? One was another one of his well-known phrases that he used to educate people with. So he said this: L'mokom shani ohev. What does this mean? The place that I love. Shom roglai molichos osi. There my legs will take me. What does that mean? Isn't it obvious? If I want to get from A to B, isn't it obvious that my legs are going to take me to B? I've directed my legs to take me. Is that all Hillel is saying? If I plan to leave and go shopping, then I go shopping. Do I need Hillel the Tana to tell me that? The place Shani Ohev Shom Raglai Molichos Osi. So some want to see this at a much deeper level, and to say this is a Hasidic idea as well, or a Kabbalistic idea. I don't know. We say in our tefillos actually on Shabbos. It says just before we get to Baruch Hu, Kol atzmosai tomarna mi kamocha. All my bones proclaim who is like you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Kabbalists and the mystics say that when a person reaches a certain level, a certain madrega, then their body automatically does things even before the mind intervenes and directs them to. Yes, it's almost like you have a reflex and you have the brain within your arms and your legs. And you don't even need to instruct your arms and legs to do certain things. They're so invested in the goal that you have that they don't need the brain to direct them in advance. So if you look at this statement now, those things that I love, let's say if I'm a lover of doing mitzvahs, my legs will take me there almost as if I was sleepwalking. I would find myself more moving towards it. It doesn't say I will make my legs walk there. My legs will take me there, almost as if my brain doesn't have a role in it. So this is an ultimate level at which a person is invested in spirituality, is that even, this is the idea behind it. Normally you think your physical self is a physical self. Your spiritual self is a spiritual self. And in a sense, your spirit has to direct your physical self to do certain things. It doesn't want to. I don't want to get up in the morning. I'd rather stay in bed. But my spiritual self hacks away at me until I get my legs out of bed and start moving. That's the way we see it. However, when you reach a certain level, this is the idea over here, even your physical self becomes almost by osmosis, absorbs the spiritual needs. And therefore you don't have to direct. I don't have to then instruct my legs to sling over the bed as I normally do to get up in the morning. Rather, my legs almost work on their own because they are already infused with a spiritual need. That's the sort of mystical way they look at it. And this is what Hillel may be saying, that if you're reach a certain level, this is how one should be. One's body should almost preempt one's mind in directing one towards a purpose, a noble purpose. That's how he understands Shom Raglai Molichos Osi. Okay, next statement. Im ator, there seems to be some doubt about the word ator now. Tovo el beisi, ani ovo el beisacha. Im ator lo tovo el beisi, ani lo ovo el beisacha. Another one of these intriguing statements that isn't very clear. Here, everyone says that the ani here the one who is speaking here, so to speak, is not Hillel, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, and you'll see this from the context of the verse we quote, Hashem is saying, Im Tovo El Beisi, if you, the Jewish people, will come to my house, to my Beis HaMikdash of prayer, if you, the Jewish people, will come to my Beis HaMikdash of prayer, Ani Ovo El Beisecha, then I will come to your house and I will bless you. If you're not interested in coming to me, then I won't come to you either. I won't bother to be with you. You have to make the first step towards coming towards me, so to speak. You have to come towards me and celebrate for me, and then I will be there for you. And then he quotes the pasuk from which he has learned this lesson. Shneimar b'chol mokom asher askir shemi avo eilecha ve'rachticha. Actually, a difficult pasuk, even though it's easily translated. The pasuk says, "In every place in which I proclaim my name, avo eilecha uve'rachticha, I will come to you and bless you." And Chazal understand this to mean the Beis HaMikdash, really, or any place. It could have been the Mishkan. Azkir Shmi, where will I proclaim my name? Wherever I place my Shechina, so to speak, which we understand mainly to be in the Beis HaMikdash, wherever I play it, wherever that happens to be, I will come and bless you there. But you've got to be there. And if you're not there, you won't receive any blessings. Again, I don't see really what is the big chidush here. I'm not sure exactly what is novel in this particular statement. So I think there's something more that lies behind it, but I haven't seen it. Maybe I haven't looked at sufficient numbers of commentaries to understand more deeply what he's trying to say there. And now we bring another famous statement from Hillel. We're going on a ramble through some of the statements of Hillel, certainly not all of them, but through some of them. And this one comes straight from Masechet Avot, and we will have heard explanations of this before. So let's have a go. Afhu ro'a dilgoles achash et sofa al pnei hamayim. He also saw, who's he? Hillel witnessed, observed once, a gilgoles, a skull, shed sofa al pnei hamayim, that was floating on the surface of the water in a stream or in a river, and he saw this skull float by. Amala, and he said to the skull, famous statement, Al ta'ataft atfuch umatifayach yetufun. Very nice tongue twister, a piece of alliteration. Because you submerged others, you were submerged, you were drowned. And in the end, those who drowned you will themselves be drowned. Now, this is a statement that's always problematic. He's seeing a skull, and he says, you know why you drowned in the river? And here is your skull still floating, assuming he was drowned. Maybe he was killed in another way. But it doesn't really matter whether he was drowned or not drowned. It seems that a person met a violent end and his skull is floating here, and the presumption is that someone killed him. Why should someone have killed this individual? Presumably, midah keneged midah, because he killed someone else. So Hillel says, the reason I see your skull here and you are the victim of a murder is because you committed a murder. Otherwise, why would your skull be here? God wouldn't have allowed you to be violently killed this way if you yourself hadn't committed the same identical crime. In the end, those who killed you in this violent way will also meet their own end. Midah keneged midah. That it's a chain reaction. A killer himself gets put to death by others, and his executioners get put to death by somebody else, and it all goes in a nice vertical straight line. But you and me know that's not the way life really is. So what does he mean? Did Hillel really think that anyone's skull he saw floating, it must prove this individual was the victim of a murder, and therefore he must have murdered someone else? Is there no such thing as the innocent victim of a crime? Is the person who's a victim of murder himself always himself a murderer? Is that the case? It may be sometimes he is, but is he always? Seems very strange to understand that. And so I think it's Rashi who says over here, a second. Is it Rashi? Yes. Rashi adds over here, Rashi's not prepared to accept that this is just a bland statement, that every time you see a person who's the subject of a murder, it dictates that he himself must have been a murderer, and he's just meeting his due, he's getting his due reward, so to speak, by meeting a similar fate. So Rashi says, and this is not clear at all from the Mishnah, and it must be that Hillel recognized the features of this skull, which is a bit difficult. Because if this is a skull without flesh on it, how does he know by reading the skull? Did he have modern methods of forensic science to help him? How did he know who this was? But somehow he recognized, or he was aware of what happened in the locality, and he knew that the victim here himself had been a murderer. So what he was saying is, in your case, you met this violent end because you yourself, I know, were a murderer. And in the end, anyone who killed you will also be killed, but not because it just assumed there was no crime. There would be no victim without the victim himself having been a criminal himself. In fact, the very first murder in the Torah, Cain kills Hevel. Hevel is innocent. Just think about it. Supposing Hevel's skull had been in a stream, would Hillel have said, because you killed someone, you yourself were killed? Well, no way. We know the Chumash says that Hevel didn't kill anyone. Cain killed someone, but Hevel himself didn't kill. So there is, even in the very, very first story of murder in the Torah, a very clear line that there is a possibility of an innocent victim of a crime. So Rashi is not prepared to accept that Hillel just made this statement willy-nilly about a skull he didn't recognize. And that's why Rashi says that this is the skull of a murderer, which he happened to recognize. And he was saying that you yourself, you bred the violence, and you are now the victim of that same violence you dispensed on someone else. There are other explanations here to try and get around this difficult statement as well, because here we're talking about questioning the whole Skav Onesh and Midah Keneged Midah, the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu deals with his subjects. And to say that there's always an identical treatment right down the line, that you get your due deserts simply in the way you dispense them to someone else and without any fault, there's no such thing as no fault, is something very difficult to understand. I have sometimes seen that this Mishnah is spelled differently with a different conjunction, sort of umetify ketufan, ometify ketufan, which changes the meaning. But we won't go into that. There are other ways of learning this Mishnah which don't make it so difficult. Now the Gemara brings a statement of Rabbi Yochanan similar to the one we said in the name of Hillel. Do you remember in the name of Hillel, Hillel said that where a person wants to go, what place that a person loves, his legs will take him. And I said it really means that somehow his legs almost take him there on their own volition if he's reached a certain madrega. So now we have a similar statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Yochanan, Ragaloi devarinish in an Arvin Bay, the legs of a person, they actually in the end take him where he needs to be. What does that mean? La'asar tamit boy tamon movilin yosei, to the place that he is being called to. Tamon movilin yosei, there his legs will take him. The place that he is being called to, there his legs will take him. Now, what does this mean? Slightly different to the statement of Hillel. So the way Rashi explains it, and it's clear, I think this is the explanation from the next story, it means that eventually everybody has to leave this world. And everybody has a place where this will take place, if you like. You're not randomly going to lose your life and leave this world in any number of different places. Rather, so to speak, the Malach HaMoves knows where he wants you. Yeah, it could be it's in your bed at night time. It could be it's at the bottom of a cliff. It could be that it's in holiday on a hotel bed. One doesn't know where it's going to be, but so to speak, your body knows where it is that you must meet your end. And even if you didn't expect to be there, somehow it'll turn out you're there because it's only there that the Malach HaMoves has got an appointment with you. It's a nice, strange idea. He won't take you somewhere else. The Malach HaMoves will not claim you if you're not where your designated place of exit should be. And in order for you to get to the designated place of exit, you somehow have to be taken there, and he doesn't snatch you. Somehow your legs take you to where you need to be. When it says your legs, it means somehow you yourself make a decision. You don't know why, but you make that decision to be where you need to be to meet your appointment with a Malach HaMoves. It's a rather dark statement. But now we have a statement. We have a Gemara, interesting Gemara, which brings a story which involves Shlomo HaMelech. It's a medrash. You won't find it inside, although the names of the characters are taken from Sefer Melachim. And that'll prove the point. Hanahu tarti kushoy to have a kaimi kami Shlomo. Shlomo HaMelech had these two kushim. Kushim could mean they're fine-looking individuals. It could mean they're Ethiopians. There's a machlokas of what the kushoy means. But we're given their names. And they were standing before Shlomo HaMelech. Their name is Elichoref, was the name of one. And Achia b'nei Shisha is the name of the other. These were the two people standing before Shlomo HaMelech, Sofrim, and they were his scribes, and their names appear. Their names appear in Tanakh. The Medrash doesn't make these names up. And they were Sofrim de Shlomo Havu. They were the scribes of Shlomo. Yom Echad, one day, Chazye, L'malach HaMoves Tava Ka'otziv. Shlomo HaMelech could see all sorts of things that we couldn't see. And he would sometimes see the Malach HaMoves. You have to accept the story in its fantastic form without asking questions. Shlomo HaMelech could see the Malach HaMoves, and the Malach HaMoves looked particularly miserable. So Amalei, Shlomo HaMelech said to the Malach HaMoves, Amay Atzivat, why are you so miserable today? Haven't you got plenty of things to do? Get on with your work, he said to the Malach HaMoves. So Amalei, so the Malach HaMoves responded to Shlomo, "De kabol minai hani tarti kushai de yosvi hacha." I'm upset that because I have been asked to take in, so to speak, to bring an end to the life of these two kushoi, who this guy called Elichoref and Achia, their day is supposed to end today, who are sitting over here, but they're not in the right place. I can't take them. They are not in their designated spots. And I've been given an instruction to take them, and yet I can't take hold of them because they're not where they need to be. So when Shlomo HaMelech heard this, he realized that these two Sofrim, who he valued very much, Elichoref and Achia, were going to see the end of their days today. So even before hearing anything more, Shlomo HaMelech says, if these two people are designated, they're my officials, I want them to stay alive. I'm going to hide them away from the Malach HaMoves. He clearly has designs over them. So what happened? Mosrinhu la Seirim and Shadrinhu la Mechuzah deluz. He handed them over. Seirim really means demons. What does it mean? I mean, somehow Shlomo HaMelech was able to talk to the animals. He had all sorts of communications with forces beyond which are beyond us, which are supernatural. So he hands these two people over to these Seirim, Shadrinhu, and he sent them with these Seirim, so to speak, to protect him, to the place called Luz. Why does he send them to Luz? We'll see what Luz is later on. Very interesting place. Luz is a place, midrashically, that the Malach HaMoves has got no shlita over. The Malach HaMoves somehow is not allowed into this place called Luz. It's a mystical town or a mystical village or a mystical place somewhere in the world, which has a force field out of it, and anyone in Luz lives forever. So he wished to hand them over to Luz, to the safekeeping there, so they would be out of the grasp of the Malach HaMoves. Okay, so Ki matu lemechuza de Luz shriva. But they only got as far as the entrance gate of Luz when they died, these two. They were taken. So Lemocha Chazia Malach HaMoves to have a gavodach. Next day, Shlomo Melech now realizes he's lost his two officers. He doesn't know why, really, but he sees the Malach HaMoves next day, and guess what? The Malach HaMoves is beaming. He's cheerful. He's in a happy mood. So Amalei, so Shlomo said to the Malach HaMoves, Amai bedichas, what's so funny today? Why are you having such a fine? Why in such fine mood? So Amalei, so the Malach HaMoves responded, I tell you why I'm so happy, because you did me a big favor yesterday. But ata debor minai tamon shadatinhu. The place I needed those two people to be in order to take them was the gates of Luz. And they were not at the gates of Luz when I saw you yesterday. So I told you about this. You reacted, tried to send them to Luz. So essentially, I engineered that they should be, through you, in the place they needed to be. So essentially, a person eventually gets sent one way or another to the place he needs to be for the Malach HaMoves to take him. So Miyad Posach Shlomo, immediately Shlomo opened up for Amhu, and he said the following statement: Raglo Deva'ilish Inun Arben Bay, just the words that we said before. La'asa demita boy, Tamon Movin in Yosei. Eventually, a person's legs always take them to where they need to meet this last appointment they have with the Malach HaMoves. I thought I was sending them away out of the grasp of the Malach HaMoves, but little did I know that I was putting these two people, right into his hands. And I delivered them to him by sending him, these people, to the gates of Luz, where the Malach HaMoves had made his appointment, so to speak, and was waiting for them to arrive. Lovely story. So it's not a very pleasant story. It teaches you that eventually you are, at your last appointment, you are where you need to be for that appointment to take place. Just in case of this strange place, Luz, I thought I'll give you an insight to Luz. Okay. So actually, when you meet Luz, I'm sharing the screen with you now. First, I think it's Vayishlach. It says that Yaakov, where he has his dream of a ladder, Vayachlom v'hinei sulam, v'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, v'hinei anochi shleach shma'atichem, and Hashem gives him a bracha at the end of the ladder experience. And it says Yaakov woke from his sleep. By Yirav, he says, "Ma nora ha'makam hazeh." How awesome is this place? Ein zeh ki im beis elihim v'zeh shah hashamayim. This is the gateway to heaven. By Yikra Hashem ha'makam ahu beis el. He called it beis el. V'olam Luz shem ha'el orishona. The place had originally been called Luz. Luz is a very special place. That's all we know from this pasuk. It's in the Chumash, but we don't know why it's special, what its characteristics are. So the next pasuk I bring over here, I think it's from Sefer Shoftim. I don't mean Pasha Shoftim. Vayelech ish eretz ha'chitim. He went to the land of the Chittim. Vayiven ir, and he built a town. Vayikra Shema Luz. Hu Shema at Hayom Hazer. It is named until today. As if that town remains until today. Now, what does that mean? Until today. So on here, there is a brisa in the Gemara, which tells us something very interesting, which is the origin of the story about Shlomo HaMelech. He tries to save these two individuals by sending them to a place where the Malach HaMoves has no control. So the brisa says, Tanya, he Luz, this place Luz, first of all, we get an interesting piece of social information. Shitzoven bo techeles. This is the place where they used to dye the techeles color. They used to get the whatever it was, the sea worm, and they used to use the shell to dye tcheles. So they had a tcheles factory there, not Efrat, but it's a place where they used to dye tcheles. He Luz, that same Luz, Shabo Sancheriv velo Bilbala, when Sancheriv came, the king of Ashur, and he completely devastated the northern kingdom, and he put much of Israel to waste. He did not manage somehow to confuse and confound the time of Luz. Luz was unaffected at the time. Nebuchadnezzar came at the time of the Babylonian destruction of the Jewish people, and he wasn't able to destroy it. So what do you see? We see that Luz somehow was invulnerable to the conquest of Ashur. It was invulnerable to the conquest of Babel, which is not bad, is it? How did it manage to remain intact? We don't know where it is. It's a shame. We'd all love to visit it. I'm sure it would be quite a tourist attraction if we knew where it was today. But it remained intact. And now here are the magic words. The angel of death has got no permission, no reshut, to enter in it. Ella Zakanim Shabbat. What happens? So what happens about the people living in it? There's a population living in there. Are they 1,000 years old today? So says the Bryce is something quite extraordinary. It's a science fiction movie. Ella Zakanim Shabbat. People have become very old in there, and they never die because the Malach HaMavis has no way of taking them. So they may well be wrinklies, but they don't die. So what do eventually? They get bored, says the Brisa. Bisman shadaitan kotzalehen, when they go out of their minds by living for so long and see no more purpose in their lives, yotzin chutz lachoma, they make the decision to leave the city gates of Luz, v'hein mesim, and they die the moment they leave. In other words, they have to commit suicide in order to die by leaving the confines of Luz. So as long as you're within the confines of Luz sanctuary, the Malach HaMavis has no control over you. But as soon as you leave, and at some point in time, you might decide you're so bored of living 350 years that you leave on your own volition. And at that point, the Malach HaMavis has shlita over you. It's interesting because Luz comes up again. Now, that's the story as it affects our Gemara over here. Luz comes up again in another midrashic sense. Luz is a magical bone in the body at the base of the spine, which is indestructible. It's interesting because there's a correspondence between these two types of midrashim. We said that Luz could never be destroyed and the people inside never died. But each of us today, midrashically, even today, there's a little bone at the end of our spine, the coccyx or someplace, I don't know where it is, which never dies. It remains. I'm not sure whether you're seeing some flashing on your screen. If you are, I apologize, there's something going wrong. I see you all clearly, but I see my little picture vibrating. And that little bone remains intact and never deteriorates, even when the body is completely pulverized into dust. And here's the Gemara that talks about it. Very interesting Gemara. Let's just do this before we finish. Adrianus Shachikat Thomas, Hadrian, this is a medrash, that Hadrian, the Roman emperor, he used to be a sort of bit of a sorcerer, and he used to try and perhaps read the future by looking at bones. You know, he was one of these soothsayers. Anyway, so one day, Sha'al Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania, he asked the following question to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania. Apparently, there are conversations between the Roman nobles and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania. It's well known. The Gemara has this a few places. Amalo, and Hadrian asked Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania, strange question. May Heichan HaKadosh Baruch Hu made tzitzes ha'adam la'ased lavo. If there's Techias HaMesim in the future and people's bodies come together again, from where in the old body does Hashem begin to sprout the new body? You know, it's almost to say as if a plant has completely disintegrated, deteriorated, how can you make it sprout again? You know, what part of it that remains intact that you can use to renew the body afresh? So Amalo, so he said, Miluz Shel Shadra, from this little bone in the base of the spine, that remains intact. Tchias HaMesim takes place because that bone is there. And if you like, the DNA of that bone, you might say, gets used to reconstitute the rest of the body, which has deteriorated. That's one way of looking at the Medrash. So Amalo, so Hadrian says, Minaina Toyodea, how do you know anything about this Luz bone, says Hadrian to Rabbi Yoshua. So Amalo, so Hadrian answered him, so Rabbi Yoshua answered him, Hevi Uhu Liodai, bring me a Luz bone, and I will demonstrate it to you. So he brought a Luz bone. I don't know where the Luz bone was, but he found a Luz bone of someone who had died, and it was still intact. Maybe it was a whole skeleton. Took it out and did the following experiment. He tried to grind it down within millstones, and it would not grind. He tried to burn it, but it would not burn. He soaked it in water, but it didn't soften. He put it on the blacksmith's mortar, and he brought down the blacksmith's hammer on the anvil onto this bone. And what happened? The anvil broke, the nifka patish, and the hammer splintered. V'lo chosa klum, nothing was lost from the Luz bone. The Luz bone remained entirely intact. So you have this strange medrash built around Luz, both a place where people don't die. It's a place which is indestructible to assault by the Assyrians and Babylonians, and it also remains somehow as a vestige bone at the base of our spines from which God can reconstitute us. It's something that will not be worn down and cannot be destroyed. It's an indestructible element of each of us. Now, I'm not sure whether in modern medicine we've quite discovered the Luz. Very nearly, you could say the DNA today, which survives through hundreds of thousands of years. They're trying to rebuild mammoths out of DNA because they found DNA. The DNA is virtually indestructible. If you find any vestige of the body at all, you can reconstitute a new creature exactly as it was before, all from that Luz, all from that DNA. Whether you want to see DNA as Luz, I leave it to you. Anyway, we'll stop today's shir. He stopped.
Eli,